In today's video, I'm going to be going through the perfect carnivore grocery list. So next time you're at the supermarket, you know exactly what to get. Everyone goes on the carnivore diet for different reasons. So whether you're trying to lose weight or you're just trying to heal, this video will have you covered. The foods in this video can be found virtually everywhere. I'll make sure to include a wide variety of foods and ensure that there's lots of budget-friendly options. First up, let's start with the greatest food on the planet, ruminant meat. Now, ruminant meat is meat that comes from a ruminant animal. A ruminant animal is an animal that has a multi-chambered stomach. So when you're eating things like beef, lamb, or goat meat, you are eating ruminant meat. Now, why is ruminant meat the greatest food on the planet, you may be asking? It's very simple. Because they have this multi-chambered stomach, they're able to very effectively break down exactly what they consume. Now, when I discuss things like chicken and eggs, you'll understand why this is so important. But essentially, ruminant meat is the most purified meat. So no matter how sensitive you are to toxins, it is great for you. Now, we know because it is purified, it has the least of the bad stuff. But to make it even better, it also has the most nutrients. In every single possible way, ruminant meat is the king. So I would highly recommend for everyone that you include at least some ruminant meat every single day. The more ruminant meat you have, the better. I personally have ruminant meat with every single meal. Maybe I'll have some other things with it, but I make sure that with every single meal, I have at least some of it. Some people think that you need the expensive cuts of this stuff because they see the carnivore influencers and stuff cooking up the nice ribeyes. But in reality, every cut of steak, including ground beef, has the exact same nutrient profiles. So it does not matter if you get the cheapest on sale cuts or the most expensive tomahawk ribeyes, you will still be getting everything you need. In fact, me personally, I intentionally opt for the cheaper cuts because I prefer it to be a bit chewy. I don't really like tender meat. I'm not sure what's wrong with me, and it's a very unpopular opinion. But yeah, it really does not matter which type of ruminant meat you're having, as long as you're having some. With ruminant meat, you can actually turn it into the greatest snacks also, but I'll save that for the snack section. One thing a lot of people have with ruminant meat, whether it be a steak or ground beef, is eggs. Eggs are also incredible. I'm not sure what it is, but when I have a meal with eggs, I just feel more powerful. I can tangibly feel it. I would speculate one of the reasons for this is that eggs are very high in cholesterol. Now, a lot of people are scared of cholesterol, but they don't understand that cholesterol is incredibly essential for human function. All of our cells are made from it. Our brains need it to function optimally. In fact, it's even a precursor for many hormones, such as testosterone. That's why you see all these anti-meat advocates, and you can just sense they're a little bit cholesterol deficient. I personally have 5 eggs with nearly every meal. I absolutely love them. I think they're a brilliant addition to a carnivore diet. One thing I will note, however, is that eggs come from a chicken, which is a monogastric animal. Now, a monogastric animal has a much less complex digestive system than a ruminant animal. Now, what happens is that the chickens that lay these eggs, they're often fed very grain-heavy diets. They're fed these pellets with a lot of ingredients that aren't super good for them. So what happens is because their digestive system isn't as complex as the ruminant animals, what they eat ends up accumulating in their flesh. And when we examine their fatty acid profile, it's very high in omega-6 in comparison to omega-3s. In particular, this one type of fatty acid called linoleic acid, which is inflammatory to humans. So if you do have the option of pasture-raised eggs, it is a good idea, as pasture-raised eggs are fed the correct species-appropriate diet and they have much healthier fatty acid profiles. However, if you're on a budget, regular eggs are still amazing. If your main goal is weight loss, both types of eggs are incredible. However, if you're trying to heal and you have a serious condition, say arthritis or some autoimmune condition, you may want to be careful with the grain-fed eggs. Another great thing to pair eggs with is chicken and pork. Again, chicken and pork are both great, but they have their limitations. Pork, like chickens, is also a monogastric animal. So they get fed these grains they're not equipped to break down and it ends up accumulating in their flesh. Another thing with chicken and pork is that it's slightly less nutrient dense than ruminant meat. What I personally find is that when I eat this type of meat, I don't feel quite as full as if I'd had a big steak or a big bowl of ground beef. Even despite some of these limitations, it is still a great addition to a carnivore diet. And if you are just starting out, I actually think it's a good idea to include some of it. It's good to have some variety at the start, as most people are used to eating numerous things. Bacon is a very popular type of pork. Bacon is great if you can find a good source of it. A lot of bacons have lots of additives, lots of preservatives added to them. However, if you can find a bacon that is just pork and salt, it is a great carnivore option. I personally don't eat too much chicken simply due to the fact that I just prefer ruminant meat. It's not that I actively avoid it, it's just simply not my favorite. Depending on where you're from in the world, seafood is a great option. It's very high in every essential nutrient, and if you can get wild caught fish, It is a great, great carnivore option. The problem with fish, however, lies in farmed fish. Again, fish are a monogastric animal. They get fed these terrible grains that they cannot break down, so their flesh becomes very contaminated. Now, to make matters worse, they've even started genetically modifying some of the salmon. So the farmed salmon you buy in your supermarket may not even be a real fish. They literally get the DNA of eels and other types of fish and copy paste it in so they grow faster, requiring less food. The other problem with fish is that they're often very lean. White fish, often tuna, it's very lean animal. So if you are going to consume quite a bit of it, you might want to add some butter or something with it just so you can get enough fats in. I think wild fish is great for everyone to include, but I would stay away from the farm fish, to be completely honest. Before I get to what's best to cook in, let's quickly touch on organ meats. A lot of people have this belief that you must consume organ meats on a carnivore diet. This could not be further from the truth. There are many people, including myself, who have been on the carnivore diet for a while and they only consume muscle meat. In muscle meat, you can get every single nutrient you need. There is not a single nutrient that is in organ meat that you cannot get from the muscle meat alone. A very popular argument for the inclusion of organ meat is, well, wild animals, the first thing they do when they get a kill is go for the liver. But what I think people fail to think about is, well, when was the last time this animal ate? Often wild animals won't eat for prolonged periods of time. So if they haven't eaten in a while and they're starting to become deficient in many nutrients, of course they're going to go for the most nutrient-dense part of the animal. However, that's very different to us. We are very blessed. We have this wonderful thing called a supermarket, which we can pop down to at any time and get whatever meat we like. So because of this, we don't have this nutrient depletion from not eating for an extended period of time, and therefore we don't need to eat the most nutrient-dense part of the animal. The thing with organ meat, however, is that having too much of it can actually be incredibly problematic. Organ meat is very high in both vitamin A and copper, which if we consume too much of, it can have some unfavorable health outcomes. In my opinion, this is why organ meat tastes so average to many people, especially after you've had it a few times. These toxins start to build up in your system, and as a way for your body to get you to stop eating it, it sends you this negative feedback mechanism in the sense that it tastes worse and worse. A lot of people find when they start carnivore, they don't mind liver, but after you've consumed it a few times, it starts tasting worse and worse. Me personally, I experienced just this. When I first started carnivore, I'd go to the supermarket, I'd get myself some liver, I'd cook it up, and it would taste pretty good. However, after I had it a few times, I was like, whoa, that's enough for me. This is tasting pretty bad. When it comes to all organ meats, if they taste good, consume them in small quantities, and if they don't taste good, you simply don't need it. It is personal preference. Okay, what about additions? Things like snacks, things like dairy. Let's look at these. First, let's look at cooking fats. What is the best cooking fat? A lot of people think that butter is the best thing you can cook in, but me personally, I think that beef tallow is actually the best. There are a few minor concerns I have with dairy, which I'll get into soon, but the reason I think that beef tallow is the most superior is because it's the most ancestrally appropriate. Humans have eaten the fat from animals for a very, very long time, depending on what your beliefs are, hundreds of thousands of years to millions of years. But we only started farming a lot more recently. Roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, humans went through what is known as the agricultural revolution, where we started not only growing crops, but farming. What's super interesting to me is that during this time, humans have developed a gene called the LCT gene, which is short for the lactose gene. 10,000 years ago, all of us were lactose intolerant. However, over time, because we've had it so much, we've developed this minor adaptation where we can break it down. Now this right here slightly concerns me. Usually for a species to become fully adapted at eating something, it takes a bit longer than that. So I think for some people, butter can be a bit inflammatory, which is why I think that beef tallow is king. It also tastes incredible. Have you ever had a steak cooked in beef tallow? It's a work of art. It's a true thing of beauty. Like I said, we've had animal fat for so many years. I just think you cannot beat beef tallow when it comes to cooking fats. However, butter is still a great option. Many people also opt for things like lard, which is pig fat, as well as duck fat. Unfortunately, duck fat didn't get a cool name like pig fat did, but it's still a very popular option. And when it comes to these things, my only concern again is that it comes from a monogastric animal. So it really depends on what they're fed. If these things are fed grains, it's just not going to be as ideal as beef tallow, but again, still a great option. Any of these cooking fats are great, and if your goal is weight loss, it doesn't really matter too much. But if you are really trying to heal, I would opt for beef tallow. Now this next one still blows my mind. Let's talk about salt. Most people, including myself until recently, believed that all salts were the same. However, that is simply not the case. Sea salt, because it's from the sea, which is highly contaminated with plastics nowadays, does contain relatively significant amounts of microplastics. Now, to make matters worse, they often also bleach this stuff to make it look more appealing. So not only are you consuming small amounts of plastic, but you're also consuming bleach. So you're much better off opting for a mountain salt, such as pink Himalayan salt or Redmond's real salt, which come from these underground salt mines which were deposited before we had these polluted seas. These mountain salts also do contain trace amounts of different minerals. The reason being is that they're not stripped of these during the processing, like sea salt is. Another thing with salt is you've got to be careful of added ingredients. It still blows my mind that they do this, because, salt is used as a preservative, but they add preservatives to salt to preserve the salt. It seems a bit strange, and they also use things like anti-caking agents, which essentially just prevents the salt grains from sticking together. It genuinely astounds me how I even have to mention that you've got to be careful of what salt you choose, but I mean, as we all know, our food supply is a little bit tampered with nowadays. Now, the next aspect of this list is something that's a little bit hard to navigate, and that is snacks. In my opinion, the best snack you can have is leftovers from the night before. That's what I'd usually do. If I know I'm going to be busy the next day, I'll cook a little bit extra. Maybe you cook up some extra boiled eggs. Maybe you make a few extra patties with a bit of cheese on top, or just some extra steaks. You bring them to work or wherever you're going in one of those chili bags. It keeps them cool all day, and you're sorted with snacks. But if you're out and about, a great option is beef jerky or biltong, which are very similar, but they're not the same thing. I made the fatal mistake last time of saying that they're basically the same thing, and the South Africans in the comments were not too happy with me. But I don't blame them though. Biltong is significantly better than beef jerky, so it is a little bit offensive. One thing I will say when it comes to buying these things though is be very careful of the ingredients. It can be very difficult to find these things without terrible added ingredients, so do watch out for that. You can also make your own homemade versions of these things. You can buy a dehydrator online. I personally bought one of those. It was a great decision. That stuff tastes so good. I've had to ban myself sometimes from making it because I just can't stop eating it. So that right there is another great carnivore option for on the go. I'll get into shortly how you can save money on these snacks, but let's first discuss dairy. This right here is where it might get a bit controversial. Earlier I discussed how we haven't been consuming it for that long, but there are a number of other problems. The first of which is that it is designed for growth. A cow or whatever animal is producing dairy makes the dairy for the growth of its infant. So there are compounds in it such as beta-casein that make it very addictive. It's also very easy to overeat this stuff. 9 times out of the 10 when someone says they're not losing weight on carnivore, it's because they're consuming too much dairy. Another problem with dairy is that for many people it can be inflammatory, in particular with pasteurized dairy. What they do is they heat the dairy to high temperatures. Now it does kill the bad bacteria, which allows it to stay shelf stable for a long period of time. However, it also messes with some of the proteins in it. So these proteins, they become denatured and therefore they become inflammatory to us. Many people also have problems tolerating lactose. Me personally, if I consume milk, my skin just breaks out in acne. So I ensure that I stay well away from pasteurized milk. Raw milk is definitely a better option, but in most parts of the world, it's just not very easily accessible. With dairy, you can include anything. Milks, cheeses, yogurts. If you are going to have a cream, try to have small amounts of it. It's very high in energy and it really stalls weight loss. But do keep in mind the factors that I have discussed regarding dairy. I think when you're starting out, it's a great idea to have dairy. It can make the whole transition with carnivore a lot easier because it is so palatable. When you first start carnivore, meat can taste very bland. The reason being is that, well, in comparison to these ultra-processed foods, it has objectively a lot less flavor. However, what happens is that over time your taste buds change and meat starts tasting more and more flavorsome, simply due to the fact that it doesn't have this contrast of the super palatable food. So including a little bit of dairy at the start can really help you get through this transition phase before you really start to love meat. Because trust me, you'll get to a point where meat just tastes so good, you won't want to eat the other garbage. Or to save money, the best thing you can do is find the cheapest places online. Go through all your local meat providers' websites and see who has the best deals. When you find a good deal, buy it in bulk and chuck it in your freezer. Depending on where you're from, you can probably find meat wholesalers who sell much larger pieces. Then you can cut it up yourself and also freeze that, which often ends up being cheaper. As well as the fact that you can just buy the cuts that are about to expire. When it starts getting close to its expiry date, they mark it down and you can find yourself some very good deals. You do have to eat it pretty quickly before it expires, but you do get it a lot cheaper. So what should your list look like? I think it's very person dependent. I think everyone should try to include a lot of ruminant meat if possible. And then after that, just fill the rest of your list with the foods that you like. I think a great place to start is just to buy lots of different meats. Mix and match it up, see what you like, and then buy more of that. Try out lots of different things, and for each meal, what's a great thing to do is what I call the 3 meat trick. How it essentially works is that instead of having one meat for a meal, have 3 different meats. Most people are used to having plates with lots of different foods on them, so when transitioning over to carnivore, having multiple different meats can make things seem more familiar, which will just make the transition seem that much more effortless. In this video, I've broken down the pros and the cons of each food, so you can now go out and buy the best carnivore foods for your specific goals. Anyways, I hope you learned a thing or two. This is what I eat in a day, and if you want to see more of my videos pop up, consider subscribing. See you next time.